Have you ever looked around and realized that almost everyone has disappeared from your life? No constant messages, no crowded weekends, no endless conversations. At first, it feels like something must be wrong with you. Society teaches us that a full life must include a full social circle. But what if the opposite is true? What if your solitude is not evidence of failure, but the final stage of profound inner transformation? Today, we will explore why the rarest personalities often end up with very few or no friends, and why this is not loneliness, but the highest form of freedom. There is a moment in every person's life when something begins to shift so quietly that almost no one notices it, not even the person experiencing it. It does not arrive with applause or dramatic announcements. It begins in silence. You start asking questions that you never asked before. Why do certain conversations leave me exhausted? Why do I laugh at things that are not funny simply to fit in? Why do I spend so much energy maintaining relationships that give so little back? These questions are uncomfortable because they challenge the habits that once felt normal, yet they are also the beginning of awakening. Most people believe growth means adding more to life, more friends, more achievements, more recognition. But true growth often begins by removing what no longer belongs. As your awareness expands, your standards naturally change. This is not because you suddenly believe you are better than others. It is because your inner world becomes more valuable than the noise surrounding it. You begin to notice how much of ordinary social life revolves around distraction, endless gossip, constant comparison, conversations that never touch anything meaningful, people speaking simply because silence makes them uncomfortable. You may still smile, you may still be kind, but something inside you no longer finds satisfaction in these exchanges. What once entertained you now leaves you feeling empty. At first, this realization can be frightening. You may wonder whether something is wrong with you. Friends invite you into the same routines, yet your heart feels absent. Crowded rooms that once felt exciting now feel overwhelming. You return home more tired than fulfilled. It seems as though you are becoming disconnected from the world. In reality, you are becoming connected to yourself. This is one of the most misunderstood stages of personal transformation. Society measures health by popularity. If many people enjoy your company, you are considered successful. If your phone is constantly ringing, you appear important. But numbers have never been proof of depth. A person may be surrounded by hundreds of people and still feel profoundly alone. Another may spend long periods in solitude and experience a peace that cannot be found in the loudest celebration. As your standards rise, they begin with yourself. You become less willing to lie to avoid conflict, less willing to agree simply to be accepted, less willing to wear different masks depending on who is standing in front of you. This inner honesty naturally changes every relationship around you. Some people notice the difference immediately. They may say, "You have changed," and they are right, you have changed. You no longer chase approval because you are learning something far more valuable than being liked. You are learning to respect yourself. That respect becomes a quiet boundary. It changes the words you speak, the places you visit, and the people you allow into your life. Without trying to create distance, distance appears on its own. Relationships built only on convenience begin to fade. Connections based on pretending quietly dissolve. Many people resist this process because they fear what they might lose. They hold on to friendships that no longer nourish them simply because they have existed for many years. They confuse familiarity with love and history with compatibility. But growth asks a difficult question. If you met these people today with the person you have become, would you still choose them? Often the honest answer is silence. This is not a reason to judge anyone. Every person walks their own path at their own pace. Some are still searching outside themselves for fulfillment, while others have begun looking within. Neither deserves condemnation, but they cannot always walk together forever. Different levels of awareness naturally create different directions. The rarest personality does not lose friends because it rejects humanity. It loses friends because it can no longer betray its own awakening simply to remain comfortable. And that is where true transformation quietly begins. Once this transformation begins, another change follows that most people find difficult to understand. The silence that once felt uncomfortable slowly becomes your greatest teacher. What used to feel like emptiness begins to reveal itself as space to think clearly, to observe honestly, and to finally hear the voice that has been buried beneath years of distraction. Most people fear being alone, not because solitude is painful, but because it removes everything they use to avoid themselves. When there are no conversations to fill the room, no notifications demanding attention, and no constant stream of entertainment, something deeper begins to surface. Thoughts that have been ignored, emotions that have been suppressed, questions that have been postponed for years. This is why many people rush back into noise. They mistake distraction for peace because they have never learned the difference. The rare personality does something different. Instead of running away, it remains still. At first, this stillness is not easy. Sitting alone with your own mind can feel like standing before a mirror that reflects more than your appearance. It reflects your fears, your attachments, your insecurities, and the stories you have told yourself for years. There is nowhere to hide, no one else to blame, no audience to impress, only the quiet invitation to know yourself completely. This is where real strength begins, not in winning arguments, collecting achievements, or gaining admiration, but in becoming comfortable with your own presence. A person who cannot enjoy their own company will always depend on others to escape themselves. But a person who has learned to sit peacefully in solitude carries a freedom that cannot easily be taken away. Over time, you begin to notice that silence is not empty, it is alive. It sharpens your awareness. You notice details that once escaped your attention. You become less reactive because your mind is no longer pulled in every direction. Decisions become clearer because they are no longer based on pressure or fear of missing out. You stop asking, what does everyone else think? And begin asking, what is truly right? This shift changes your relationship with time as well. Instead of feeling the need to constantly stay busy, you discover the value of slowing down. A quiet morning becomes more fulfilling than an evening filled with meaningless conversations. A walk without headphones becomes an opportunity to observe your thoughts instead of escaping them. Reading a single page with full attention becomes more satisfying than consuming endless information without reflection. Many people watching from the outside misunderstand this. They assume you have become distant, antisocial, or lonely. They see fewer gatherings, fewer messages, and fewer public moments, and they conclude that your life has become smaller. But what they cannot see is that your inner world has become immeasurably larger. You are no longer measuring life by the number of people around you. You are measuring it by the quality of your attention, the depth of your peace, and the honesty of your relationship with yourself. There is also a surprising discovery that happens in prolonged solitude. You realize that many of your desires were never truly yours. They were borrowed from the expectations of others, the need to impress, the pressure to fit in, the fear of being left behind. As these influences lose their power, your choices become simpler. You stop chasing experiences because they look impressive and begin choosing experiences because they bring genuine meaning. This does not make you withdraw from the world forever. Solitude is not a prison built to keep people out. It is a place where your character is quietly refined. Just as a sword is strengthened through fire, the human spirit is strengthened through moments of intentional aloneness. When you emerge, you do not return to society seeking approval. You return with clarity, patience, and the ability to give without losing yourself. The rarest personality does not seek solitude because it dislikes people. It seeks solitude because it has discovered that the deepest relationship you will ever build is the one you have with your own mind. When that relationship becomes peaceful, every other relationship changes naturally. Only those who are at peace with themselves can truly be at peace with the world. As your relationship with yourself becomes stronger, something else begins to happen almost without your intention. You stop performing. You stop adjusting your personality to match the expectations of every room you enter. For many years, most people wear invisible masks. One mask for family, another for friends, another for work, and yet another for strangers. They become so accustomed to changing themselves that they forget which face is real. This adaptation often begins in childhood. We learn that certain parts of ourselves receive praise while other parts are rejected. So we hide what is authentic and display what is acceptable. For a long time, this seems like the safest way to live. It helps you avoid conflict. It keeps people comfortable around you, it earns approval and creates the illusion of belonging. But there is a hidden cost that few people recognize. Every time you abandon a piece of your true self to gain acceptance, you quietly weaken your connection to who you really are. The rare personality eventually reaches a point where this cost becomes too great. It no longer wishes to trade authenticity for approval, not because it wants to rebel or prove a point, but because pretending becomes more exhausting than being misunderstood. This change is rarely dramatic. You simply begin speaking more honestly. You stop agreeing with opinions you do not believe. You no longer laugh just because everyone else is laughing. You become comfortable saying, "I don't know," instead of pretending to have all the answers. You stop chasing invitations simply because you fear being left out. These are small changes on the surface, but they create enormous shifts beneath it. People notice. Some are inspired by your honesty because it gives them permission to become more honest themselves. Others become uncomfortable uncomfortable because your authenticity silently exposes the masks they are still wearing. It is difficult to remain comfortable in pretense when someone beside you has chosen truth. This is why certain friendships begin to fade without arguments or betrayal. Nothing dramatic happens. There is simply less to connect over. Conversations that once lasted for hours become brief. Interests begin moving in different directions. The bond that depended on constant approval quietly loses its foundation. Many people interpret this as rejection. They wonder why others seem distant or why relationships suddenly feel different. But not every ending is a punishment. Sometimes people leave because the version of you they connected with no longer exists. They were attached to the person who constantly said yes, who never challenged them, who always made themselves smaller to keep everyone comfortable. When that version disappears, the relationship often disappears with it. This can be painful because memories remain. You remember shared experiences, laughter, and moments of closeness. There may even be a temptation to become your old self again just to restore what was lost. But ask yourself an honest question. If returning to those friendships requires abandoning your authenticity, have you truly regained something valuable, or have you simply returned to a comfortable illusion? Growth often asks for courage that no one applauds. The courage to disappoint expectations. The courage to accept misunderstanding without rushing to explain yourself. The courage to let people create stories about you while remaining anchored in your own truth. This does not mean becoming harsh or emotionally closed. Authenticity without compassion becomes pride. True authenticity is quiet. It does not demand agreement. It does not seek to convince everyone. It simply refuses to live a life built on falsehood. Ironically, this honesty creates space for something far more meaningful. The people who remain are no longer attracted to a carefully managed image. They are drawn to your real character. They appreciate your silence without feeling the need to fill it. They respect your boundaries without taking them personally. They value your presence because it is genuine, not because it is convenient. These relationships are fewer, but they carry a depth that superficial connections can never achieve. There is no constant performance to maintain, no fear that one mistake will destroy everything. You are accepted not because you are perfect, but because you are real. The rarest personality does not lose people by becoming authentic. It simply stops holding together relationships that could survive only as long as the mask remained in place, and whatever cannot remain in the presence of truth was never meant to remain at all. After learning to live truthfully, another transformation quietly begins to unfold. It is less visible than the others, yet it changes every relationship you will ever have. You stop expecting other people to complete what should first be cultivated within yourself. This is the beginning of emotional independence, and it is often misunderstood. Many people believe independence means refusing help or pretending not to need anyone. That is not strength. That is often fear wearing the disguise of confidence. True emotional independence is something much quieter. It is the ability to remain inwardly stable, whether people praise you or criticize you, whether they stay or leave, whether they understand you or misunderstand you. Think about how much of human suffering comes from expectation. We expect someone to always reply. We expect them to appreciate our efforts. We expect them to love us in exactly the way we imagine. When reality does not match those expectations, disappointment follows. Slowly, our peace becomes tied to circumstances we cannot control. The rare personality begins to notice this pattern. Instead of asking, why are they not giving me what I need? It starts asking, why have I placed my peace in someone else's hands? That single question changes everything. When your happiness depends entirely on another person, you unknowingly give them authority over your emotional world. Their attention lifts your mood. Their silence creates anxiety. Their approval makes you feel valuable. Their rejection makes you question your worth. Without realizing it, you become a prisoner of circumstances that are constantly changing. But as awareness deepens, something remarkable happens. You stop searching outside yourself for constant reassurance. You realize that your value does not increase when someone admires you, and it does not decrease when someone overlooks you. Your dignity is no longer determined by public opinion. It comes from living in alignment with your own principles. This does not happen overnight. There will still be moments of disappointment. There will still be days when someone's absence hurts or when misunderstanding feels heavy. Emotional independence does not erase emotion. It simply prevents emotion from controlling your life. You allow yourself to feel without allowing those feelings to define your identity, Wonka. As this inner stability grows, your relationships begin to change in unexpected ways. You no longer cling to people out of fear that you will be alone. You no longer tolerate disrespect because you believe no one else will accept you. You stop begging for attention, explaining your worth repeatedly, or chasing those who have already chosen to walk away. Many people mistake this calmness for coldness. They believe you have become distant because you no longer react dramatically. But what they are witnessing is not a lack of feeling, it is the presence of balance. A tree with deep roots does not panic every time the wind begins to blow. It bends when necessary, but it does not break. In the same way, a grounded mind remains steady through praise and criticism, closeness and distance, gain and loss. This kind of strength also changes the way you love. Love is no longer driven by desperation or fear of abandonment. It becomes an act of generosity rather than dependency. You care deeply, but you do not possess. You appreciate people, but you do not make them responsible for your inner peace. You give sincerely without demanding constant proof in return. There is a quiet freedom in reaching this stage. You no longer enter every conversation hoping to be validated. You no longer measure your worth by how many people remember your birthday, invite you to gatherings, or include you in every plan. These things may still bring joy, but they no longer determine the quality of your life. Ironically, this is also when your presence becomes more attractive. People feel safe around someone who is not constantly asking for emotional payment. Your calmness creates space for honesty. Your stability allows others to breathe. They sense that you are with them because you choose to be, not because you fear being without them. The rarest personality does not become emotionally independent to avoid connection. It becomes emotionally independent so that every connection can be built on freedom instead of need. And only a heart that is free can truly love without losing itself. As emotional independence takes root, you begin to see something that many people overlook for their entire lives. Your energy is one of the most valuable things you possess. Time can never be recovered once it is spent, but energy is even more delicate. You can have hours available in your day and still accomplish very little if your mind is scattered, your emotions are drained, and your attention has been pulled in 100 different directions. The rare personality eventually understands that protecting inner energy is not selfish. It is an act of wisdom. Observe how most people move through life. They say yes to invitations they do not truly want to accept. They involve themselves in arguments that have no meaningful purpose. They carry other people's emotional burdens without ever asking whether those burdens were theirs to carry. They spend countless hours discussing people instead of developing themselves. At the end of the day, they wonder why they feel exhausted despite doing nothing that truly nourished them. Exhaustion is not always the result of hard work. More often, it is the result of unconscious living. As your awareness deepens, you begin to notice the invisible cost of every interaction. Some conversations leave you inspired, peaceful, and motivated to become better. Others leave you restless, anxious, and mentally heavy long after they have ended. The words may have lasted only a few minutes, but their emotional weight remains for hours. Once you recognize this difference, you can no longer ignore it. This is not about labeling people as good or bad. Every human being carries struggles that are often invisible. Some are healing, some are hurting, and some are simply unaware of the influence they have on those around them. Compassion asks us to understand this. Wisdom asks us not to absorb everything we understand. There is an important difference between helping someone and allowing yourself to be consumed by their chaos. Many compassionate people confuse these two things. They believe love means always being available, always listening, always sacrificing, always fixing. Slowly, they become emotionally depleted. They pour from an empty cup until there is nothing left to give. The rare personality learns a different lesson. You cannot become a light for others by constantly extinguishing your own flame. Your responsibility is first to maintain clarity within yourself. From that place, whatever kindness you offer becomes genuine rather than resentful. This realization changes your daily choices. You become more intentional with your mornings because you understand that the way you begin your day shapes the quality of your attention. You become more selective about the information you consume because not everything deserves a place in your mind. You stop reacting to every opinion, every criticism, every invitation to argue. You realize that not every battle deserves your presence. People may misunderstand this restraint. They may say you have become distant or difficult to reach. They may wonder why you no longer participate in endless debates or unnecessary drama. They may even accuse you of thinking too highly of yourself. But your silence is not an expression of superiority. It is an expression of discipline. Discipline is choosing peace over proving a point. As this discipline grows, your life becomes surprisingly simple. Instead of collecting acquaintances, you begin valuing depth over quantity. One sincere conversation becomes more meaningful than dozens of empty exchanges. A single trustworthy companion becomes more precious than a crowd that disappears when circumstances change. And if such a companion is absent for a season, you no longer panic. You have already learned that solitude is far healthier than companionship built on convenience.